Heyo, wir lassen es mit der Begrüßung. Also ich bin's, ein Spasti von Phan Oneshots und ich bin heute nicht alleine da. Sag mal hallo.
Hallo!
Ja, und zwar, unser Kanal wird heute ein Jahr alt.
Yay!
Genau, heute vor einem Jahr haben wir unser Kanal erstellt. Wow, Logic. Auf jeden Fall haben wir uns heute was Spezielles überlegt. Und zwar, was machen wir heute?
Wir lesen eine englische Fanfiktion über den Set on Fire und Amazing Phil.
Boah, ja, so Fan.
Obwohl
ich diesen Shipping-Namen einfach nicht mag.
Ich hasse ihn auch, aber...
YOLO.
Jo.
Auf jeden Fall, die Geschichte wurde von Sydrox geschrieben. Ich hoffe, ich spreche den Namen richtig aus. I'm sorry if I spelled this wrong and sorry for my crappy English. So, yeah. Der Titel der FF ist Phan Oneshots. Es ist Kapitel 7, Lost Prince. Phil Lester was raised in an orphanage for his whole life. Well, for his entire life he remembers. The boy's blue eyes could reveal the oceans and sky, and his smile lit up any room. Phil always tried to make the younger kids happy and always appeased Mrs. Pavlov. Everyone could tell that Phil didn't belong here, dirty and without a family. He had his sense of royalty around him. Once he was 18, he had to leave. Phil needed a place in the world, a home and a family, people who watched him grow and treasured him. Mrs. Pavlov told him he was 14 when he was dropped at the door. Phil couldn't remember anything. Mrs. Pavlov said that he had a note that said Philip L. She never knew who or what dropped him off, or if it was even his parents that dropped him off. Phil was walking along some busy streets in town. He had his knapsack on his shoulder and a beanie on his head of black hair. Phil needed a place to stay, or a way to London. He wanted to go to see the city. He wanted to leave Manchester. He walked into the train station and tried to buy a ticket.
Sorry, hon, all of the tickets for London are sold out, the lady said. Phil looked at the ground and nodded. He moved away and sat on the bench. Phil looked up and see a boy with round brown eyes staring at him. Hello, Phil said.
Hello, sir.
The boy said.
You were looking for a passage to go to London. May I ask why?
I want to live there, to make my claim there. Something is drawing me there. I've dreamed about it, Phil said with a dreamy look.
Just your luck. I'm heading there, and I have a second ticket.
The boy said.
My name is Daniel. I go by Dan,
he said, sticking out his hand. Phil said, shaking Dan's hand. Dan knew Phil, more than Phil knew himself. Dan was sent to Manchester to grab food and to search for the lost prince who he once served. Dan grew up behind Phil, obeying his command and serving him. Dan had watched Phil disappear the dark night in the hands of their traitorous head knight. Dan had screamed for his prince. He screamed for so long that he couldn't talk for the next few days. Now Dan's prince was next to him, alive and unchanged since he last saw him. Well, Dan noticed his cheekbones were more announced and he was taller and his eyes seemed not to be as bright. The two got onto the train and Phil looked out the window in awe. Dan sat with his back on his lap and his eyes on Phil. He was more attractive than Dan remembered. Dan couldn't think like that. This was his prince, his ruler and majesty. So, you have a southern accent,
Phil said, turning to Dan. Oh yes, I've lived with the royal family for my whole life. My mother is the queen's maidservant, Dan said.
Wow, you know the royal family?
Phil asked with wide eyes. Yes, I used to be the youngest prince's right-hand man. I used to be his friend and protector. He was a great person, but he got taken and I haven't seen him since, Dan said with tears in his eyes.
Dan, I'm sorry. Your prince is lucky to have a loyal friend,
Phil said. He yawned and looked at Dan again.
I'm going to rest now,
Phil warned Dan. Dan nodded and watches as Phil falls asleep.
You can't catch me, Dan, an 8-year-old Phil yelled as he ran down the hallway in the castle.
Philip, slow down,
Dan yelled. Phil's royal garb was bright and colorful, compared to Dan's browns and blacks of his peasant clothes. No, that's not how the game works, Phil yelled. He ran into a courtyard and slowed to a halt. Dan cocked up behind him. The both stood in awe of Phil's older brother Martin was practicing swordplay.
He's good,
Dan said. He's a show-off, Phil scoffed. Would you like to fight me yourself, Philip? Martin asked. No, thank you. Father would yell at me if I did, Phil said. Oh, come on. We'll fight for... how about Daniel? Runa gets him as their servant, Martin said with a smirk. No, he's mine. Don't take him away. You have Arthur, Phil yelled. Fight for him then, Martin challenged. Phil looked at the sword near his foot.
Phil, don't.
Dan said, grabbing onto Phil's arm. I have to, for you, Phil said. Dan felt his cheek heat up. Phil stood up and Martin smirked.
Phil woke up with a start. His hand went to the scar on his chest. He's always wondered why it was there, but that dream was weird. You okay? Dan asked with sleepy voice.
Just a dream,
Phil said. His hand hadn't moved. Does it hurt? Dan asked.
No. How do you?
Phil asked. Was he the prince? Was that him? No, it can't be. But they had the same name. You look hurt, Dan lied.
Can I show you something?
Phil asked. Sure, Dan said. Phil moved his shirt up. The small cut was even lighter than his pale skin. Dan's eye widened when he saw it.
I've always have had this. You know what happened. Tell me,
Phil demanded. Your, brother Prince Martin challenged you when we were 8. He wanted to take me in as his new servant, but you wouldn't let it happen, so you battled him. You didn't have any armor on, and Martin hit you and cut you, Dan said.
So, are you a prince?
Phil asked. I will take you to see the king and queen, and they can tell. They are your parents, Dan said, looking at his hands. Phil looked at him and sighed.
I don't want to hope that you'll bring their son home to only show them me,
Phil said.
Phil yawned again and fell asleep. Then smiled and pulled out his small journal he's had since he was a child. He looked at a small picture of a small Phil and him at a festival. It was taped onto a photo page. He missed his best friend. Little did he know, his best friend has missed him. Even if he didn't know who he was. Phil's bag had been kicked and opened. A couple of journals fell out. Then looked at them and put 2 of the 3 back. Then grabbed the oldest looking one. He recognized it. It was the journal especially made for the royal family. Then opened it and saw on the leather cover a rudely written Phil and also a Dan. Then knew what this was, but he saw any of the pages ripped out and could tell when Phil had begun writing and drawing in it again. Then read the poems and saw the sketches of one person, Dan himself.
Oh, Philly, you've been ready to come home for a while now, haven't you?
Dan muttered as he shoved the book back into Phil's bag.
Daniel, the queen said. Her rich ginger hair was now becoming dull with age. The king's black hair tainted with grey and white. The stress of losing a son was taking a toll of them. My Majesties, I think I found him, Dan said. The queen looked at her husband with hope. Bring him in, Daniel, but if it isn't, the king said. Dan knew and nodded. I know, but trust me, Dan said. He ran out of the door and grabbed Phil. He walked in and Phil was watching the ground as he walked. The 2 stopped in front of the thrones. Look at us, boy, the king said. Phil looked up at them. His blue eyes widened and could feel memories rush back. He couldn't stand up and Dan caught him. The queen rushed off her throne and leaned near Phil's side. She grabbed him from Dan and held Phil close. Oh, my baby, the queen said. Dan stood by the king as he patted him on the back. We knew you would find him, the king said. Dan smiled and knew that in a couple of days Phil would be normal and they would be a team again. Also, das war die Fanfiction The Lost Prince.
Ich muss dazu noch sagen, dass ich die Geschichte jetzt zum ersten Mal gehört habe.
Das hast du gelesen?
Besser gesagt gelesen, ja.
Ja. Und das war jetzt auch gerade das erste. Ja, aber zu Felge, lass mich die Abmoderation machen. Okay. Also ja, das war jetzt das erste Mal, dass wir das auf Englisch gelesen haben. Wir hoffen, es sind nicht allzu viele Sprachfehler drin. Und wir hoffen, es hat euch gefallen.
Ja.
Uns auf jeden Fall. Voll cool.
Ja.
Ja, und danke nochmal an die Autorin. So, a special thanks to the author, I can't speak English, I'm sorry. For let us
read her story.
Yeah. For let us read her story. So, I really can't speak English. Auf jeden Fall, das war's mit unserer Geschichte, beziehungsweise mit dem Video. Wir hoffen, es hat euch gefallen. Wenn ja, lasst uns einen Daumen hoch da. Wenn ihr mehr sehen wollt, checkt die Beschreibung ab, da sind alle Links. Und ja, wir sehen oder hören uns ein anderes Mal. Bye!